Hello again, Struck. It is less than a month left until Diablo 4 launch, until we can get our hands and play the full Diablo 4 experience. And here I am with another Theorycraft build setup that is full and ready for launch. This is Dark Eyes, a rogue build that is all about shadows combined with eyes. You step into the shadows and you um, make explosions that freeze, chill, and stuff like that. There's a lot of good stuff about it. You would see how I've changed some things that go well together with other things that go well with the previous thing and another thing. I pretty much love how this turned out. I loved playing a code imbued flurry in the beta, but this one is shadow imbued. However, this shadow imbued has extra chances to cause certain frost damage explosions while hitting chilled or frozen enemies, and that's why we are using a unique item here that gives us a lucky hit chance to freeze enemies. So until we get the lucky hit chance to freeze enemies or other ways to chill and freeze enemies, you might want to use the chilled caltrops, but more about that later. In general, this build will be evolved eventually further when the game is released. I'll keep it updated. And I think there isn't that much to say other than expect to see Paragon Boards here, expect to see the skill tree, the unique item I suggest, including two alternative unique items if you can get lucky with the best in slot one I consider for the build. There's gonna be suggestions for gear rolls, for the gems. So in general, I try to cover everything you might need to know about the build, including aspects, obviously. So buckle up, strike up, and let's go. I like starting with the skill trees. And this is what it looks like, the zoomed out picture. We have puncture, we have flurry, we have caltrops, dash. We also don't use a subterfuge skill. But what we have here is shadow imbuement, as I mentioned, and shadow clone together with the close quarters passive. This is I try to build around the close quarters, I guess, one way or another. But this is what the icons of the skills look like. If it's easier for you that way, so basics skill puncture. Then, as I said, flurry, dash, and caltrops. 1 point in those. And I'm gonna go into detail and now just wanted to show you the icons. Now I have to go back to my spreadsheet because it's easier to show you things and to tell you why I picked one over the other. Puncture, just 1 point should be enough. We're not going for basic skill damage here. We're just using it for this extra energy regeneration and to build our combo points. Why? Because first of all, this attack speed we are boosting from one of our Paragon boards. We are boosting this by 30%, which is a whole whopping from 45 attack speed it goes to 60, which definitely nice to have that 15% attack speed. So keep in mind we only use that to build the combo points, and then it will be probably puncture, 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 flurry, puncture, 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 flurry. Obviously, you can do multiple flurries after one after the another. You just won't have that extra 105% damage and attack speed. But I strongly suggest playing combo points with this setup rather than some of the other mechanics. Well, I don't know what the third mechanic will be. We'll have to decide once that one is there. This one synergizes well with the combo point system. I took fundamental puncture. I think it's great hitting an enemy with at least two blades because it has three now, makes them vulnerable for 2 seconds. Then if where it hits any vulnerable enemies, it will make all enemies hit by that cast vulnerable. I think it's lovely rather than the stun. 30 maxed out, 2 points into siphoning, 2% is good enough. Caltrops and dash, as I mentioned, 1 point, enhancing both of them, and disciplined caltrops because I'd rather have this one. But keep in mind, if you think that you need the chance to chill, you would see later why you need chance to chill. Consider using methodical caltrops until you get certain aspects and other ways to make enemies either chilled or frozen. For example, the unique item makes enemies straight up frozen. It doesn't chill, straight up freezes them, and that helps us make some cold explosions you'll see later. So for dash, methodical dash seems to be the better option for us. So dealing damage to crowd controlled enemies with dash reduces its charge cooldown, and we want to be using dash as much as possible because we're using an aspect that makes it drop grenades. And then we're using another aspect that gives us bonuses to enemies hit by our grenades. And this is the only way for us to do the grenades. So dash cooldown reduction, very, very good for us. And weapon mastery. I cannot make a build without putting 3 points into weapon mastery. I think it goes very well here, since we'll be mostly dual wielding, but we would still have a bow crossbow somewhere out there. But both of our skills take the dual wielded weapons as their damage sources. It means damage to healthy and increased damage is what it would benefit from if we use a mixture between a dagger and a sword. Next, we take exploit, lovely passive, malice, another good passive, goes well with many builds as long as there's vulnerable. And then shadow imbuement, why only 1 point? I don't think we need more. The gains we get per point are not worth it. 1 point is more than enough. Enhance it, but blend it. So the primary explosion makes enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. That's more than enough. This one's not bad, but I'd rather have more ways to make enemies vulnerable. Then maxed out precision imbuement. Obviously, we want that crit chance against imbued enemies. Shadow crush only 2 points. Consuming shadows only 1 point. 10 energy here would be good enough to still give us energy and sustain us. Along with other things that give energy. Shadow crush, good 1 second stun, not too bad. If you don't care about the stun, remove it to 1 point, maybe put another here. Um, then Shadow Clone, maxed out, obviously, 1 point, 1 point, 1 point in all three. And then we have Innervation, Second Wind, and Alchemist's Fortune. I really love those three. I love taking those in my build. So I couldn't see myself removing either of those. To increase, you have working hit chance, and here this increases the working hit chance, and you will be doing a lot of non-physical damage. And then this one, you spent for every 100 energy you spent, it grants you increased working hit chance for 5 seconds. Again, if you combine this with this, and then combine it with that and some other working hits, it's lovely. And close quarters combat, as I mentioned, the passive damaging a nearby enemy with marksman or cutthroat skills grants attack speed bonus for 8 seconds. With both attack speed bonuses active, you gain multiplicative increased damage to crowd controlled enemies. Remember, we're using both dual wielded weapons skills, yes, but this one is a marksman skill, ranged marksman skill. This one is a melee cutthroat skill. Um, so that's the synergy there. You will be doing certain things, and this one is also considered cutthroat. So puncture is even more important than it might seem for this build. That's why I think combo points work well, because you want to use puncture every now and then to build the combo points and to trigger the second close quarters bonus. Next up is the unique item. In Diablo 4, as you know, only one unique item can be equipped at a time, and I chose three, but one is the top tier pick. I'll talk about it now. I'll talk about the alternatives during the aspect segment because it fits best to talk about those then. Frostburn gloves, they give you up to 15 to 25% chance to freeze enemies for 2 seconds without chilling them beforehand, straight up freezing them. Gives you increased cold damage, it gives you increased crit strike chance, up to 8%, pretty solid. And more crits are very good for this build, you'll see later why. Then freeze duration, another great thing added. Needs additive freeze duration. And then there's another working hit chance, 5% chance to restore your primary resource. So even better. It's difficult to get a resource node on something like GWOFs, resource affix on GWOFs. That means you should be fine without taking rings with resource aspects, and this saves up some room for good stuff. And this brings us to that good stuff, the legendary aspects. As I mentioned, there are alternative unique items, and you would have to rearrange for one of them. The other one is GWOFs, so not much needs to be rearranged. Let me go through all of them first. First, we have Exploiter's aspect on the helmet, aspect of encircling blades on the amulet, quickening fog. I made some changes. If you watched me play this build, make this build, if you watched me make this build live on stream several days ago, instead of quickening fog, I had siphon protection on the chest. Well, I removed it because I realized I overlooked something, which is I overlooked the fact that uh, you will see in just a moment. You will see over here. You will see how this one requires enemies to be hit by our grenade skills, but I decided to not take days or another grenade. So I needed to add this, and I think it's actually a very good thing. So sacrificing um, damaging a vulnerable enemy with a core skill has X chance to give you a barrier. You would have a little less survivability that way, but I think it's fine. I think it's good enough. If you play well, you won't feel the need of that barrier much. But this one will be nice because it drops a small grenade, and small grenades by themselves are actually pretty solid thing to have dropped. It gives you defensiveness in its own. Um, so it dazes enemies, and even you don't need points into that one to drop it. So the next aspect, Pence elusive menace. I showed you over here elusive menace. I'll show you those all of them later. Let's just go through the list. Blast Trapper is only until the unique goes there. Frostbitten aspect in the boots. Icy Alchemist aspect in ring 1. Aspect of corruption ring 2. Shadow Slicer aspect on the weapon, the one-handed main hand weapon, and the off-hand weapon. Aspect of imitated imbuements, and for the two-handed bow slash crossbow, whatever you put, vengeful aspect. Thankfully on Rogue, this one is always active as a stat stick aspect. Not It's not like the Necro or the Sork where equipping a two-handed weapon removes your one-handed, two-handed, off-hand, I mean dual wield. So a little bit about the alternative uniques in a moment. Let's first go through those to show you what each does. Icy Alchemist is the bread and butter of this build, but without Frostburn and freezing the enemies, it will be difficult. So you would need to maybe chew enemies with caltrops, as I mentioned. You know, you can switch caltrops to doing cold damage and chilling enemies by 20% per second, and this would be enough to not ruin the build. This will be enough to give you chance to chill, and still doing damage to chilled enemies will trigger those explosions when you use shadow imbued skills. And it's a massive whopping 75% chance, but it says up to. What would that mean? Is it from 1 to 75% randomly? I hope they clarify more. Then Encircling Blades Fury hits in 360 radius. I love that, and it does a little bit extra damage. Then your imbuements have increased potency against vulnerable enemies. That's why I was trying to get as many ways as possible to grant invulnerable on the enemies, to stack it on them. When you cast Dash, a shadow clone is spawned at your location. Pretty much you get a free ultimate. Because that's what our shadow clone is. That one probably won't be as strong. We'll have to see and test. And it deals X of the base damage. But if that benefits from our passive here, that makes our shadow clone do additional 20% of our damage. See, this one does 60 plus 20%. So if the other one does the up to 35 plus 20, it's not gonna be that bad. It's only 25% less than the other one, but it's good. It's good to have that. And with Dash, we have another thing, as I mentioned, the smoke grenade. at the end of Dash's cooldown being reduced as well. So I think it's good. Automatically dropping a smoke grenade in the end of Dash and the cooldown being reduced for each enemy dazed this way. Um, so you can spam Dash more often. You're reducing the cooldown of Dash with this and with the passive upgrade that we took. So you can do more Shadow Clones that way. And speaking of Shadow Clones also mimic the imbuements applied to all of your skills, which means they would trigger this thing more. And casting imbuement skill grants your Shadow Clone increased damage. Pretty solid. And this brings us to making an enemy vulnerable has up to X% chance to grant you critical strike chance. We want more crit chance for things like this one. Shoot enemies hit by your grenade skills have chance equal to double your critical strike chance. So the higher your critical strike chance, the higher the chance to instantly freeze shield enemies. And this again brings us to something like using caltrops before you get this freeze, because while you have this freeze you would be able to chew enemies from that one. But um, if you don't have chilled or frozen enemies to begin with, you would need caltrops to at least chill on top of eventually freezing some enemies. But yeah, this one is nice, and you deal multiplicative increased crit strike damage against frozen enemies with this. And then exploiter aspect must have for every build, in my opinion. Crowd control duration and most of all increased damage to unstoppable enemies. And temporarily, until you get the unique item on the glove slot, you can use Blast Trapper, dealing direct damage to enemies affected by your trap. In this case, it's Caltrops. Has a chance to make them vulnerable for X seconds. Then this one, while you have both bonus of close quarters combat key passive, your dodge chance increases by 1 to 5% whenever you're hit by close enemies, and it keeps stacking and building up until you successfully dodge. Then it resets and starts from the beginning. Now, as I mentioned, there are alternative unique items. Grasp of Shadow can go in the same slot, so no need to do any heavy reworks to the setup. It's a glove the same way as the other unique item as the Frostburn. So it's good. Damaging vulnerable enemy with a marksman or cutthroat skill has X chance to summon a shadow clone and that mimics your attack again. Perfect for this setup. Then there's shadow clone damage, and then there's ranks to core skills, to the core category skills. In this case, it would be flurry for us, and it also gives us attack speed and vulnerable damage. Then alternatively, what you can do is this blast trapper, you remove it. Then you take the exploiter, put it in the gloves, and then on the helmet you put Harlequin Crest. 2 ranks to all skills, extra damage reduction, cooldown reduction, very good for dash, so we can keep spamming it as much as possible. Extra life, and most of all, crafting material drop rate. Even if you don't use the Harlequin Crest all the time, use it for Helltides. By all means, Helltides, make yourself an alternative item to place, for example, in the gloves with Exploiter. Um, so temporarily you can remove the Frostburn or another stuff and then equip the Harlequin Crest for the crafting material drop rate when doing Helltides for Helltide materials. And then you can again remove it. So having an extra item so you can use the Harlequin Crest for Helltides is, in my opinion, a must-have. Next up, let's talk gems. There are multiple gems that I think one way or another are good for the setup. For example, on the weapon you want Sapphire, Skull, Diamond or Emerald. Diamond for ultimate skill damage for the clone. Skull, good for life on kill. Obviously works for every setup. As long as you're killing, of course, and you should be killing, otherwise what the fuck are you doing? Sapphire, crit strike damage to crowd controlled enemies, and then Emerald crit strike damage to vulnerable enemies. Works well with most setups, if not if not all, at least most. Go and Ruby for either healing received from the skull or from maximum life works well. Um, then diamond is all resistances. Resistance to all elements. Obviously, you can get more resistances to a specific element if you need it. If you need it, just pick one, which would be fire, poison, shadow, lightning, or cold, and put one of those. You have three trinkets, two rings and one amulet. Obviously, there isn't much choice, but if you need to patch up a resistance or two, obviously use those right gems for the right resistances you need. Gear rows, gear affixes. There's over like 300. Look at that. That's all the different 272, and that's probably not all of them, but let's say it's close to 300 affixes that exist in the game. I've tried to make it easier by shortlisting around, in this case, 45 in orange on my website, and on my spreadsheet it in white. At the top, you would see things that I think are higher priority than the other category, which is here in light blue. And on my website, it's in the golden color. So higher priority versus lower priority. But this is not to say that things at the top are necessarily higher priority than things in the middle or the bottom of that category. But still, the category itself is with higher priority. Let's tell you what the keywords are. The keywords to look out for when considering your stats. First of all, you're looking for crit strike and crit damage. Then you're looking for the damage types this build does, which are shadow. Place number one would be shadow and physical. Place number two would be cold. So you will be looking for skills that use that skills that are input for shadow, or you're looking for the skill categories. And in our case, we're using the core skill, the imbuements skills, and the ultimate skills for damage. We're also using the basic skill, but I wouldn't focus on basic skill damage. We don't use it for damage. We use it mostly for triggering certain things and building combo points. Lucky hit chance extremely important. Ranks to core imbuements, ultimate skills, damage to core imbuements. So in general, when I say keywords, you're looking for any combination between crit strike and crit damage with either of those damages, either of those weapon categories. Ranks, work hit chances, um, also resistance to all elements, definitely good. So then damage to enemies affected by trap skills, they will be. If you use caltrops the right way, they will be affected by your trap skills. Elites, another keyword. So the same things that I mentioned earlier, but to elites. Damage of the certain types, critical strike chance with the certain types, damage for X seconds after killing an elite, damage to close enemies, another keyword close, vulnerable, crowd controlled, other two keywords, damage while healthy. Then imbued skills, damage to vulnerable enemies with imbued skills exists, crit strike damage with imbued skills exists, and type damage, in our case shadow imbued skill damage exists. Also imbued skill damage without specifying type exists, so you could end up getting both this and this. Then there's imbuement potency. As for the second category, there's all sorts of interesting stuff like damage to injured, healthy, all stats, dodge chances. There's damage for X seconds after dodging an attack, attack speed for X seconds after dodging an attack. All those synergize with this build. And then there's movement speed, dex, resource cost reduction, energy generation, regeneration, etc. on kill. Um, so a lot of stats. I hopefully shortlisting them to 45 would make it easier, because the more you reroll, the more expensive it gets, and eventually you would have to cut your losses and try with another item rather than wasting coins and materials. In the Paragon boards, I only took 4 boards, but I tried to squeeze them dry for every little bit of bonuses I could get. So as usual, I have two versions. One would be this version that you're seeing right now, the maxed out version, max level, maximum points from renown, which is 20 more Paragon points from renown. So that's 220 Paragon points spent. Then there's the earlier version, which at 95, level 95 rogue with 0 points from renown, or a level 90 rogue with 20 renown points, which should be the actual case. At level 90, you would have those 20 renown points if you play right. This is what it would look like. I'll start board by board, and then eventually I'll give you the full version differences. Let's go with the starting board as usual. I'm going for the damage rather than the survivability. So damage, damage life, life damage, skipping this life, moving on to this one, getting glyph socket closer or closer. Although I think it's closer maybe. Closer, doesn't matter. For every 5 dexterity purchased within range, good throw skills deal increased damage, which would be our dash and our flurry. Both of those would benefit from this. And it is lovely. So our goal for this before leaving this board is getting this 40 decks. That's why one dex is here, one dex is there. There's two decks here. Then you're moving over here, taking this damage, and then damage and dex and dex. Or you could just take this one before going for this dex. But the dex gives you 9.6. This one is 5, this one is 5, this one is 10. This one also gives you 10 decks, so keep that in mind. I would go here, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then move. And after that, you will return to this node because there's decks here. There's 70 total decks in this board you can take later. Moving on to the next board, as you can see, it's very far away the Cunning Stratagem. Your non-damage combo point bonuses are increased by 33%. In our case, this is attack speed, which at 3 combo points, again, you have to spend 3 combo points for this. At 3 combo points from 45%, it becomes 60% attack speed, and you want that chunky attack speed bonus. So before you go there, first of all, you need to go here. So you're going this way, dex, strength, stuff on the way, and you're reaching glyph socket, putting turf on it, which at rank 20 would give you for every 5 strength purchase within range, you deal 12.79, so let's say 12.8, increased damage to close enemies, which in most cases it will be the enemies you're fighting will be close range. And you gain damage reduction against close enemies, pretty solid. This is a strength node. It requires 25 strength for the bonus, and you want to get that before you move out to the remaining parts of the board. So what you do first is you prioritize this core skill damage and dex, and then core skill, maybe int and core skill. And eventually you get dex. And there's strength here, and here. And that gives you, with the way things are with this one, it gives you 25. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 5. That's 25. You don't even need to waste stuff on this strength and armor here if you don't want to. I think this is the most optimal way to do this. And what else do? We have more strength here, which later we can take. There is strength here and there is 2 strength there later and here, and we will return to this board later. Now we're moving on this way, taking basic skill damage. Might as well. I mean, we don't really need it, but might as well take it since we take the core skill damage on the way, the 2 times core skill damage. So you could either skip this one or take it, and I decided to take it. It's 1 point only. Then you're moving this way. Armor, resistance to all elements, boom, 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 boom. Taking this one and then resistance to all elements and exiting from here. And that brings you to tricks of the trade. This one shouldn't be here. This probably a mistake there that I clicked by accident. So over here, let me double check that this doesn't exist on the other. Oh yeah, it does. Well, you have 1 extra point. You have 1 extra point at the end of the setup. I'll spend it later and add it in the links where I think would be the best place for this point to go. So yeah, tricks of the trade, you're starting by taking this damage to close enemies and this damage to close enemies and this damage to close enemies. After you've taken this, you're moving on your way here. Instead of doing your marksman skills, grant your next cutthroat skill 25% increased damage and vice versa. First, do this one. This one first, then do that one. So you're going here, taking the armor sheet on the way. I'm not a fan of this one, but no other choice. And this is a dex port. So what you're doing here is you're taking this dex and you're putting chip. For every 5 dex purchase within range, you deal increased physical damage. Again, when you're not imbued, you will be doing physical. Keep that in mind. And then physical damage increases the damage an enemy takes from you by up to 10% for 15 seconds. This one requires 40 dex. Obviously, you want as much as possible dex so you can boost the physical damage. So you're taking this dex, this dex, this dex. Then you're going for the damage to elites, damage to elites, damage to elites. You're not taking this one right away unless you really want to, but then what you need to do is move on over here. Keep in mind this one and this one also give you dex and 10 of it. Moving over here, taking this one, and then you're going down here, taking this and this dex, which works for that one. So I personally would take this one before going there so I can have the 40. And then this one would give you to 45. And then you're taking crit damages, physical damage, and physical damage and crit damage, and exiting here. Next steps would be to get this one here. By the way, this is the no witnesses. I would go from this way. Take the crit damage, damage to healthy crit damage cluster. Moving over here, you take this strength. By the way, for this one, you would need intelligence for the combat socket. So I would go here, here, then take this socket. Then start working towards this intelligence, this damage, this intelligence, this damage. And then this intelligence, willpower, intelligence, intelligence. And this brings you to 39 intelligence. Which is more than fine. I mean, you want to get that early, that much intelligence on the way to exiting. Later, you would return to this to get the remaining one piece of intelligence note. But now you have 39, which is 35, I guess, for the five times intelligence for crit strike damage to core skills. After that, you're going here, taking crowd control, impaired duration, damage taken over time reduction, both of them. This one, you're skipping on that one, you don't need it. And then from here, you're going all the way to no witnesses. But what I would do personally, I would first take that cluster and then move on to no witnesses. So after you take these decks, go down, then go up, and then go here. And then next up would be filling. Filling. And in terms of filling, you can start with multiple boards. You can start with this one, cutthroat skills damage, or you can start with the core skills crit strike damage. Or you can even go for this one, damage to close targets. I personally prefer to go for this one first, then this one, then that one, and then that one. So in terms of filling here, as you can see, there are changes. We've taken those notes, we've taken this int, and we've taken this dex and life. Might as well, right? Um, and then moving on over here, you fill this one with all the decks you can get. You go get this decks. Then there's a bunch of other dexes here spread around the place. This is what it should look like. After that, you fill with this one damage to close enemies. As you can see, differences, solid differences. You're taking almost everything except those two ones. This one requires strength, so again, you have to take this and that one and that one. And next, as you can see, we filled up with this one here. But before you fill up with this one here, you want to do something else. You want to go and take that one filled up. So as you can see, this one here, for every 5 dex physical damage, we filled up this one already. So we don't need to worry about it. But for this one, you fill it up. And this is how it looks like. It has 70 dex when it's filled up. So as a comparison, so you can see the differences. solid chunks. And the rest of them, as you see, I took this bit of basic skill damage dex. Might as well, because I didn't see something else that would give me that much. This one is regular damage and basic skill damage. And since we're taking the regular damage, might as well take the basic skill damage, which is a lot, even though we're not building around basic skill damage. And as you noticed, we have one extra spare point left that we can put elsewhere. I'll add it later into the setup, and it will be in the links that you can access from my website and from this spreadsheet over here. I'll update those. To get notified when I upload more content like this one or other builds and guides for Wooter and not so Wooter games, you can subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on notifications. As well as keep in mind there's something called memberships on YouTube, which lets you be a paying member for my channel to get access to perks such as emotes and badges made by me, as well as the option to get one-on-one tutoring for the very basics of Adobe Photoshop, Premiere and After Effects. And memberships can be cancelled at any time if you no longer want to be a member. Thanks for watching all the way until the end, Struck Web. Keep it cool until next time, and goodbye.